Okay, so I'm gonna try my best not to have too much glare on this, but because it's colored pencil and colored pencil has wax, I might have to switch angles and you'll have to watch it at an angle, so hopefully that won't be too difficult. Okay, so I start with a pencil, it doesn't matter, this one's a 4B, and then here's an HB. It doesn't matter what you use as long as you draw fairly light. And this picture is not very sharp, but I think it'll be fine. Okay, so first thing, again, is try and get the angle of the head. And I always draw pretty light. So in this case, I'm kind of using the shape of the hair to help me see the relationship. And again, it doesn't, for me anyway, it doesn't have to be perfect. I'm more interested in other things, but okay, so right away I like this shape here, so I'm gonna go ahead and put in the shape of the eyebrows, and I use this hairline as a guide to see if I'm close. So remember, I'm doing all the T stuff, but I'm kind of doing it in my head. So if you need to do it, draw it out, that's perfectly fine too. So let's look at the space. I'd say the eye is spaced about here, or the lid, I should say. So the goal with the color is to allow some of the gray of the paper to show through. At least that's my goal. So don't feel like you have to get rid of all of the gray, because I think it provides kind of a nice transition. So I think the shape of the eyebrow should be a little rounder up top and a little wider the head. have to raise this eye. Okay, so let's look at the eye, see how much higher that is. That should be right where this one's at. So I have to lower this eye because if I draw a line straight across, this is tricky because, you know, when something is not straight across, right, you have a tendency to want, let's make this a little bigger. You have a tendency to want to see things straight, so that should be where the lid is. Okay, let me redraw. The thing with colored pencil is that you're basically drawing and redrawing several times, and you'll see what I mean. Like, I'm doing a light outline, and you can go straight into the colored pencil if you feel comfortable, and I've done that a lot. It's a nice challenge, especially if you just use one color. But I kind of want to show you one approach. So I do this all in graphite very lightly, just to give myself an idea of where it's going to go. And then what I'll do is I probably most often go over it with brown and a really light red. It's not the exact same red that you probably have, but the red that I told you to get was something that you would have access to like immediately. There isn't really a right or wrong red. It's just the red that I am going to use hopefully has less wax, and I hope it'll show up better. So I'm kind of outlining these shadow shapes, not completely, but to some degree. It's because, you know, you don't want to get lost. It's okay if you make changes, which I probably will. But you want to have something to like anchor down into when you first start. Basically what you're doing is you're not just coloring. I don't really like that term because that implies that you're filling in. But what you're trying to do is you're trying to use color to express the form, but you need some kind of guide, and for the lack of a better term, like, it's not like a coloring book per se, but when you do use a coloring book, you know, it's already outlined, so I'm giving myself some groundwork here. And you might see some, you know, graphite doesn't blend very well. So often you have to erase it because sometimes it gets in the way. Sometimes it works okay. It just depends. If you want like a cool gray transition and you don't want to use black, then graphite seems to work okay for that. Okay, so this looks okay to me, and I'll go ahead and start. And I'll make adjustments as much as I see fit. Okay, so here's your brown, and I'm gonna go right into this. Okay, whatever is black or dark, I want to establish it as brown first. Brown's a kind of a good intermediate color. So you see I didn't leave enough space here with my graphite, so this is where the eraser comes in. And again, I'm using a pretty light touch. This isn't coloring. You're still drawing with it. I hope that shows up okay and not too waxy. Okay, so I gotta get a little bit sharper point on that. Okay, so again, I'm just using a lot of hatching. So I see that this needs to come down. And a little flatter here, kind of how I had it before. And you know, there's probably a ton of tutorials out there for different kinds of effects that you want. I want mine to look still like a drawing. Like, I really like Baroque and Renaissance drawings where it's kind of a play between realism and then kind of artificial looking, meaning, you know, drawing, you purposely using lines where there aren't any. So a good example would be Hans Holbein, and if you've never seen his work, you could look it up, and that's always been, that and Gustav Klimt, they've always been big sources of inspiration for me. Okay, so there's brown and red. Okay, so here's the red that I have two reds. This one is called Sanguine Russet 065, and it's made by Caran d'Ache, CARAND'Ache. It's Swiss made. And then the other one is a Derwent. This one is a watercolor pencil. I never use it with water. It's called Scarlet Lake 12. So I'll show you. Here's the first one, the Caran d'Ache, and then here's the Derwent. So notice this is like a brown red and this is like a orange red. And now if you use regular red from your colored pencil set, it'll look more like this. You see that? That's like a true red, like a poppy red. I'm off, sorry. Let me start over. So this first one is the Caran d'Ache. This middle one is the Derwent. And then this last one is your typical red colored pencil. This is by Winsor Newton. But what I see here, and it might look a little different on your screen, I'm gonna go with the brownish red, just because I want it to be subtle. So again, I'm gonna do the same technique. I have to erase some of these lines. Okay, I'm gonna do the same technique, light pressure. And what I like about this approach is that you won't even really notice that it's not as red And you can always, like in some of these areas where it's a little pink, you can switch to one of these other reds and just do like a slight augmentation, you know, just kind of punch up the color if you want. So you notice I'm erasing where I had graphite because that's where I'm going to lay in some of my color. This isn't that much different than the approach you might take for color, watercolor. You're trying to slowly build up tones. And I can't see the screen at the same time, so I hope this is coming out okay. This doesn't seem to have a glare on my end, but you never know. These other ones, the colored pencils, those do. So and this looks kind of cool already. Like, if you didn't want to go all the way, just work more with the brown, the red, and then some black, and then you can do some white highlights, and you know, that would look cool, and you could just leave it like that. So definitely be a little bit more on the illustration side, but a cool illustration. And I might use blue for the eyes just because I think it'll stand out nicely. But you can do a couple of things. You can use graphite and white. I'll show you here on the corner. There's a couple things you can try. So here's black, okay? And then if you make it gray, it's got a bluish tint to it. Okay, and then there's graphite. It's probably, I'm guessing it's probably showing up as a glare. But I'll try and get you some close-ups if you can see. And then, obviously it's not a true blue. Now here's real blue, and then when you put white over it, and you can do a combination of all those things. You can start with a base of black, and then do some blue highlights. Okay, so I'm gonna go back over this, and I'm gonna begin pressing a little harder to try and define some of these areas a little bit more. And here's my black, and you can see that black cuts pretty nicely. So I go back and forth with black and brown. So often with the hair, like I said, you know, you don't want to fill it in. However, there are exceptions. So like, for example, with this hair, I want to fill it in more. but not so much the face, because there isn't, this is really dark and you can't really fake that. There's no reason to have, you could have the gray come through as highlights, but other than that, hair or really dark shadows, those are the exceptions to you know, when I said don't fill it in. And also, you know, you can push your accentuation. Like if this isn't dark enough, often I'll get a black ballpoint pen, and that's pretty nice because it'll, once you get too much wax, too many layers, this stuff doesn't like to blend, and then you can sort of hatch and cross hatch ballpoint pen on top of it if you're careful. So I like this, and I want to leave a little bit of a light area, so I need to make this top area darker. Now, the problem with some of these pencils is that, I don't know if you can hear it, but sometimes I have these like these dry areas or something. Like it's scratchy, it's not laying down color, and sometimes you have to just, you know, if you have a piece of sandpaper or something like that, you can scratch it off. And there's different brands. Other brands have more pigment or more wax, and some are softer. I like these. This is a very thin, if you can see that, because it doesn't have a lot of wax, and it goes on a lot more like a regular pencil, which I like that for these. And I'm going for subtle color more so. So I don't know what happened there, but there's like a little bump. I don't know if it's under the paper. Okay, so I'm going over it with brown. We'll talk a little bit about edges. You know, these edges are a little bit, they seem a little hard right now, but what you do is you just increase the pressure and leave these edges how they are. If you want it to have this kind of soft effect, then you can take an eraser to it. I go in, erase my pencil, and then redraw with my brown, just because this graphite will kind of show through in a way that I don't necessarily want it to. It came in a little too much on the cheek. A little straighter. Okay. And you can be as creative as you want with like the background or the shirt. You can use a marker if you want it to be flat. Sharpie kind of works okay too. Okay, so Now let's go into the eyes. I'm gonna increase. You see those little shadow line of the eyelid. So I think the only thing that's going to be a problem in terms of glare is going to be the white. So here's the black. Doesn't seem to be glaring too much.